This is Terry White, writer and producer of Better Minneapolis and the podcast. Just want to encourage you to become a subscriber, and if you're already a subscriber, to consider becoming a paid subscriber. It helps keep things going. Thank you. Enjoy today's podcast. Hi, today I'm here with Billy Menz. He's running for District 1 of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. Hello.
Hi, how are you today, Terry?
Great. Why don't you go ahead and start by introducing yourself? You're currently a commissioner. Maybe how long have you been a commissioner? And just clarify that you're seeking the DFL endorsement in the upcoming city convention.
Absolutely, Terry. So I am the District 1 Minneapolis Park and Rec Board Commissioner that covers Northeast and Southeast Minneapolis. Everything east of the river. Actually, that'll change for this year. There's a little bit of a carve out in across the bridge near the Stone Arch.
Oh,
that'll be for District 4 now.
Okay.
So I'm losing some constituents, but making sure I am seeking the DFL endorsement. Terry and I, we know each other back from our Green Party run in 2017. I've served on the park board since 2021, so about 3.5 years of work on the park board, and really enjoy it. Really enjoy the service that I get to provide for my neighbors and my constituents, and take a lot of pride in representing all of our constituents at the park board, for better or for worse. But have learned a lot about governing and how to be effective in this role, and how important the role really is in local politics.
Mm-hmm. So give us an idea why maybe you initially ran and why you're running again.
Well, it's really a commitment to service. So my career, which started after I graduated from the University of Texas, was I started out in AmeriCorps working with the homeless, started a street newspaper. So I really appreciate what you're doing, Terry. Community media is sort of the lifeblood of democracy and how we involve ourselves as constituents. So, and after that, began my teaching career in Austin, Texas, really working to serve communities that may not have the services that are available to everybody. Ended up moving to Oregon, taught there. My wife is a physician in town, and she went to school in Oregon, and then we ended up in Minneapolis based on residency match. In Minneapolis, I was an elementary school teacher in this neighborhood, Kingfield neighborhood, over at Lindale, and really learned a lot about ESL education. Really surprising piece that Minneapolis is so diverse. When you're not in Minneapolis, you don't think of Minneapolis as a diverse place. Maybe now you do, but 10, 15 years ago, it was not thought about that countrywide. So
now, are you still teaching?
I am.
Okay.
So now I moved into I get an EL certification from Hamlin along with a master's degree to teach EL, which is English language, which is teaching immigrant students whose native language is something other than English. Mm-hmm. I do have a little bit of a Spanish background, and it comes into play, but I don't have a Pashto or an Oromo, so I teach kids who come from all different backgrounds. All different countries.
So how does that kind of roll into your work on the park board? I mean, I'd love to hear an interview of kind of what the park board does, because I think they do more than I realize. I mean, I know you work hard to put the baseball season on, but I know they also do a lot of youth programming and things like that. So is that something that's related to your day job? Is that something that you put a lot of effort into? Can you talk about that some?
Well, I mean, that's a couple of questions there. So the Minneapolis Park and Rec Board is funded primarily by property tax dollars. So about 80% of our budget comes from property tax. And we also have a fund called the Enterprise Fund, which is based on revenue from things that we get in and then how we go out. It's supposed to be an enterprise foundation where the revenue coming in matches the revenue going out. But 80% of it is funded by property tax.
And then there's also isn't there like a nonprofit park group?
Like a foundation?
Yeah.
There is the Minneapolis Parks Foundation, which is our philanthropy arm. It's a separate organization, but they work with us in order to hold dollars or help with fundraising agreements with local groups, and also raise a lot of money for certain projects that we have. They're currently working with us directly with the North Commons project, which is a transformational project
Right.
that's happening over at North Commons, to where they're going to build a new gym space and a new pool. It's a huge project, and the foundation has been securing large-scale donations along with money that's coming from the state, and we're really working to get that project complete. But the property tax dollars are important to understand, because right now the park board is going through sort of a little bit of a budget crisis. So property taxes for a while were, the commercial entities in downtown were providing a lot of property tax because of the value of those buildings. Well, since COVID and since the pandemic, and since how we're going to re-engage our downtown buildings, those values have dropped. So those property tax dollars don't necessarily go away, but they get spread out, sort of like a deflated balloon across the city, which is why we're seeing our property taxes go up in individual homes, because we're covering the cost of what's happening downtown or what's not happening downtown. So that's kind of the biggest issue facing the park board right now, and really the city, how we manage to rebuild those commercial properties in the downtown buildings or in other spaces, so that the property tax burden doesn't solely fall on us homeowners.
So what is the park board budget, and is there a risk of like programming being cut back, do you think, or?
I don't know if there's a risk of, we're going to fight as hard as we can to keep programming. But the park board's budget is about $120 million, give or take, depending on what the enterprise budget versus the property tax budget. That's negotiated every year with the mayor and with the Board of Investment and Taxation. So we ask for a certain property tax levy, and the BET either approves that or does not. We negotiate with the mayor on what that percentage increase should be, and sometimes that can be delicate conversations, trying to figure out where our needs are and where the city's needs are, based on the park board budget. So Kathy Abeni is our representative on the Board of Investment and Taxation, and has done an excellent job of sort of negotiating that with the superintendent. The mayor has been supportive of parks. I mean, the mayor is very, very supportive of our parks, but budgets are tight, and there could be some disagreements around what's important to the city. And I think that one of the things that us as park commissioners need to do is make sure that people know that Minneapolis is a city of parks. Like, that's what makes our community special. And I really think the mayor understands that. But with budgets, things can get a little bit sticky. So that's something to keep an eye on as constituents, how the property tax levy that the park board is requesting varies from what the mayor might be requesting. And us as commissioners are also trying to be responsible with the taxpayer money, making sure that we're not, asking for too much or claiming that this is a really important piece, that we have to manage the public dollars in a way that is really effective. We do run sports leagues. We maintain a ton of land space, nature space. We, take care of shoreline. There's so many things that the park board does that is kind of intertwined with the city a little bit, but also we're expanding our role. We've increased funding with the city for parkways, which will help with some road maintenance. We've also added a stormwater fund, which is a new fee that homeowners will see, in an effort to make sure that we're managing the stormwater on parkland, so that we're being responsible and stewards and getting that work done within the park board, and collaborating with our city partners or our watershed partners to make sure that the urban water cycle is taken care of. And obviously parks are a huge piece of that.
So you have oversight over the lakes, right? And water quality in the lakes. I mean, I've heard and seen like a lot of increase in, like, I don't know if it's algae or what it is in the lakes, and they've got the big trucks and all that, or boats but so does this stormwater fee, is that going to help clean the water before it goes into the lakes? I mean, how do we keep the lakes clean in your estimation?
Well, that's one of the goals. That's one of the places where I think that maybe there's been a little bit of, jurisdictional like who's responsible for what, and we're going to work that out. But it is more ability for us to manage that stormwater, which I don't think that there's been enough resources in the past. We might not have known how the stormwater goes through and gets to the lakes. Lakes are hard to keep clean in an urban
They're
environment.
big.
They're big and they're isolated.
Yeah.
Like there's not a lot of flow. At least from what I know of the science. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a stormwater expert. But that would be a good thing to talk with Kathy Aveni about too.
Okay.
She is a stormwater expert. She really helped facilitate this new fee and how it's going to work within the park board structure, and then in collaboration with our watersheds and with the city. So I'm hopeful that is a place where we can increase our capacity to manage the water that falls from the sky and runs through our streets and into our parks and eventually into our lakes.
So can we talk a little bit about the structure? I mean, I've, in my writing, kind of advocated that the city of Minneapolis should consider a structure like the park board, where you have certain districts and then you have at large, right? How is that structure working, do you think, for the park board? And do you think it would be effective on a city level?
I actually don't mind the idea of having 6 districts and 3 at-large commissioners. What I do have a problem with is the way that we are elected. So the district commissioners are fine. Like the people who are in my district get to vote for me. But what happens is that the at-large spaces, I think, is where we're falling down. We're disenfranchising voters with the way that we are voting for park board. So when we vote for those 3 at-large positions, we're ranking people 1, 2, 3. But that means that we're not voting for each spot really, because the number, your top choice is really what is going to get supported. So we're ranking for 3 different positions. So if I rank a person number 1, well, they're going to get put up there, but we're not actually, those 3 positions are not isolated. So as an example, Tom Olson, who is a great commissioner, I really like Tom, he obtained the at-large bid last time. But in reality, Mary McKelvey had more top 3 votes than him. He had more top votes. But because we're basically voting for 1 position and there are 3, I think it disenfranchises voters. So either, I mean, and this is not without controversy, I've argued that we should have a designated indigenous seat. So, and I don't know the constitutionality of that, but I think that there's something to be said around having indigenous voice at the table at the park board in some form or fashion. And I believe that we could figure out a way to have a seat that is designated for the indigenous communities of Minnesota, and figuring out how that seat could be solidified. The park board, when Annie Young was on, I mean, we've really leaned into understanding the history, and we're not going to reconcile for what has happened to our communities, but we can start to do some things that might stretch the law or the constitutionality of things in order to make sure that we have representation. Maybe there's also been arguments around maybe there should be, like those 3 seats, maybe there should be 1 that's designated for the northern part of the city and another one for the southern part of the city. So instead of it being at large, it's more like at large in certain sections. So district 1, 2, and 3 would also have another at large. So I think that there's some wiggle room in how we do those 3 at large seats, because right now I don't think that it supports us being able to get more people of color on the park board. We are a body of 8 white people and 1 person of color, and I don't think that is representative of our city. So, but it's not a job that pays a lot. I mean, we get a $17,000 a year stipend. So there's barriers to people serving on the park board that some folks have and some folks don't. But I mean, I think that there are lots of people who would have a grand voice on the park board and would bring a new perspective and different perspectives that maybe we're missing right now.
Well, and the indigenous voice is an interesting one, because I was just reading today an interview with Elizabeth Schaefer, and I guess I didn't know that there's some. I mean, I go to the dog park there at at the falls.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's some negotiations that are going on over indigenous land, and um, maybe that goes smoother if there is an indigenous person on the council, or or some
Absolutely.
kind of liaison or something, and then you could, who knows, in developing North Commons, run into archaeological sites and stuff like that. So it would, and just to have a different perspective.
And just the practice, like we live in a capitalist system.
Yeah.
And maybe we don't need to live in as capitalist a system. We need some of those ways that we lost when we basically had genocide in our country. We lost some ways of knowing that I see in the schools us being reclaimed and re-understood. And I think that that's really valuable. And you're right, the dog park, there are some sacred lands there from indigenous communities, specifically Dakota. And if you haven't done it yet, Terry, I would really highly encourage you to do there's a training that you can do at Pike Island through, I think it might be through NACD or one of the indigenous groups that explains and sort of shares the history of of what we call Pike Island, but what could be called Bidet or Bidote, because it's the confluence of the Minnesota and the Mississippi rivers. And it's a very, very sacred place. And I would encourage all of your listeners, anyone, to take that training and go. It's a 2-day event. It's a lot of times done through the schools or through the parks, but it is eye-opening as to what the history of this land is, and the history of people who look like us and what we did in order to claim this land. And I think that that's something that we can't correct it, but we can learn, and we can move, and we can attempt to repair relationships. And some of the work that I've done on the park board has been I think has helped facilitate that. I read an Indigenous acknowledgement statement, and it sparked us talking about acknowledgement and how performative that can be sometimes, and really what is the action that we can do. So we developed an Indigenous action plan, which is now we have an Indigenous Parks liaison who works for us and works with us. And then we've actually started a new Native Partnerships Council, which there's a partnership of elders in the state and in the city who come together and are providing some guidance, providing some input on different plans that we have, so that we're including and elevating that voice, as opposed to what may have happened in the past.
Well, that sounds very
really
interesting.
exciting.
Yeah, and exciting. So give listeners an idea of what those are, what work you want to continue. What are kind of like the 3 pillars of, your reelection?
Well, youth. I mean, I think that youth are always at the center of anything I do. I'm a school teacher. I think that our kids are the way that we sort of build our communities, and making sure that we're providing as much as we can for our youth, and in an authentic way. Like we're addressing the issues that are plaguing our youth in some ways. I mean, our youth are under attack. Mm-hmm. I mean, I fully believe that our youth are under attack from social media companies, from internet, from notifications, whatever. They're like just holding this device that they have in their hand. And the only way to combat that is nature and programming and play, and that's what the parks are.
Well, I mean, my own little pitch, I guess, that I thought was a really neat program is I forget what it's called, but you started a lab, audio video lab where
Spark Studios.
Sparks, yeah, I think was a great program. So, I hope it's getting used.
It's kind of just begun. So that is a really great initiative that the superintendent Al Bangora pushed. Mm-hmm. So we rearranged some dollars and created Spark Studios. And these studios are not meant to bring technology and make kids more technical at the parks. It's to get the kids there and have them have things that are entertaining to them, but also be surrounded by nature and play and all these things. In my district, Graco Park just recently opened, and it's a fabulous space right along the river. If you haven't been there, I'd encourage you to go.
Have to go.
It's and there's a Spark Studio there, which has lots of technological advances where kids can make videos or do this or do. I'm not super involved in that, but I do know that at Edison High School, we have a Edison Tommy Student Network. And sometimes the resources that schools have might not match the resources the park has. How do we collaborate and communicate and get kids doing things at school and then doing things at park and then being there? Because the rec centers are about relationship building. And when youth are in those buildings with our workers, they're building relationships. And the way that our youth are going to grow and learn and change and become community stewards is through relationships with adults and how they build them and those positive views and those experiences that they can draw on when they're older. And the more of those experiences that happen at our parks, in my opinion, the better for all of us.
I mean, they played a big role in my raising my kids for sure. We spent a lot of time in the rec centers and, always had good experiences. So pillar one, youth. What are a couple of the other pillars for your election?
For me, around the river. So I think that, we've been a city of lakes. We are in, we're over here in Kingfield, and the lakes are ever present in South Minneapolis. But I believe that the river and the Above the Falls River plan and new parks going along and the history of that space and how it's transforming into a more recreational space is really, really key for the park board and for the city. I think that downtown is moving towards the river. So how do we bring in the parks along this grand resource? I mean, the Mississippi River is not a local resource, it's an international resource.
Right.
And we have a responsibility to take care of that resources at this location because of how important it becomes further down and further down, further down. My wife's family is from Louisiana. My father-in-law comes up here and he's like, that's not the river. Because the river, it grows and it changes and it's an incredibly valuable piece of the Earth's ecosystem.
Yeah.
And I think that if we're going to center ourselves around a body of water, it's the river. And that river has become a really great resource for both the north side and northeast, connecting our two communities. In the past, it's been a divider, and I want to see the river become a connector. Because the Mississippi River, in its grand and all-encompassing wonderfulness, should not divide a city. It should connect a city. And by refocusing some efforts down there, it benefits Northeast residents, it benefits Northside residents, but I think it benefits us all because that is a place where people can identify with. And we've identified with the lakes, but I think that if our city changes and grows and identifies with the river, we're going to be stronger for it.
And the river is why we're here, right?
Exactly why we're here.
City's not here without the river.
Those falls and the history of Minneapolis is
the whole
fascinating.
flower and all that. So third priority.
I mean, indigenizing our processes. I think that one of the things that I've really pushed on the park board. I mean, labor is also in there. I mean, because I'm a labor advocate. I'm a union member. I mean, labor is a very big pillar in how we treat our workers. But if we're looking at broad scope, how we change our practice to I think that the park board has had a lot of ownership language that we own. I heard that a lot before I was commissioner of like park board owns more land than any other entity in the city. The park board doesn't own any land, in my opinion. We steward it. We are the current stewards of this land space. And sure, we live in a capitalist society, so we're going to have ownership language associated with that and policies and things like that. But the faster and the better that we move into a space where we're the stewards, then we're all in this together. And I think that we as a park board can only do so much on the board. The staff and the culture of the park board, I think, needs to open a little bit. The park board has existed to protect land from development over the 140 years that we've existed. And I actually think that maybe now we're in a space where we don't have to protect as much land, but we have to be stewards and open it up to you as a citizen, to this other group. We hear a lot about land back. I mean, that's a really difficult thing to discuss. There are a lot of parameters. There's a lot of obligations that communities would take on if they take land back, and we don't want to put those obligations on them. So there's work around that as well. But really, it's how are we kind of turning over the keys a little bit, because these are our spaces.
Well, there was just it was highly, I guess, promoted event where the city, and I don't know if the park was actually involved in it, gave back land. Was the park board involved in that at all?
I don't think that we were involved. I know there's an open spaces plan right now happening at around the Little Earth neighborhood. It's for the East Phillips open spaces plan. We just got a little bit of report on it last night. Those discussions have come up, and I commend some of the park board staff, specifically our Indigenous Parks liaison, Carrie Day Esquimal and Emma Pashuta. We're working on that to not be afraid to welcome that discussion in, and figure out what is the reality of that. Is it even feasible right now? There's also been, I've worked with the St. Anthony Falls Heritage Board. So down near the river, there's been ways of trying to give back or foster through not ownership, but responsibility with Indigenous communities. And of course, Owamni is right down there. So there's a lot of things moving in the right direction, in my opinion, in this work. So that's one thing that I'm really become inspired by around how do we, as a land holding or land stewarding institution, this wonderful, incredible, what we've done to help protect and build the city around parks. How do we now look at that and say, we've done this? What do we do to sort of foster something new that could grow into something in 100 years that maybe looks different, but is still just as incredible, and just as, and maybe even more, because maybe more people feel like they're able to steward these spaces that we all care about.
So that's kind of like a legacy attitude, right?
Yeah.
Like, what do we want our legacy of the park board to be and the lands that we're stewarding? Is that?
Yeah. And I think that just setting the stage for policy where it's not a barrier anymore. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to change everything. It's just, it's like law. Law is interpreted in different ways over time, and like allowing our perception of our land stewardship to change and grow with the communities, with the ideas, with the atmosphere that's happening in our world, I think could have real benefit.
Well, the parks are definitely a big benefit to the city, and I've been surprised at how prominent they are. Back in 2017 when you first ran, I think at times, like, candidates for the park board were more well-known than city council candidates, I think. And so people take parks here very, very seriously. And, one of the other surprises for me was kind of how big that you mentioned that you're part of the union, but how big the union issue became. I mean, the national politicians and people were weighing in on it, and I know a lot of council or park board members were faced a lot of pressure. Maybe you could explain what role do you have in any kind of negotiations? It was sort of my understanding that any of those negotiations are somewhat separate from the park board, and the park board will set policy, but there's a different group of people that actually negotiates. Can you just talk to that a little bit?
I think that's a really great question, because there is a lot of perception in that the park board, the group that I serve on, is involved in those negotiations, and we are not. But that doesn't mean that there's not a role for the board. And I think that when we had the strike, when Leuna had their strike, and we had 3 weeks of labor off work, and we were getting to this point, we're an elected board. So my constituents call me and ask me, because in the paper it says the Minneapolis Park Board is doing this. And the park board is sort of like waiting for the staff negotiation team and the union negotiation team to come to an agreement. As a long-standing public school teacher who is a proud MFE member, MFE is now our new union name, it was I had a lot of inner responsibility to sit on one side of the table and realize that I'm a union member. Like I am, and strong unions are one of the lifebloods of this country, and especially of this city. And this was before Trump was elected. And one of the things that I was trying to share with my fellow colleagues and the staff is we need strong unions in this country and in this city. And it's our responsibility to make sure that our unions are strong. And right now we are doing things and communicating to our union in a way that is not supportive of that. I thought that there was challenging language used by Minneapolis Park Board. I also thought that there were things that the union leadership, was doing that that there was disagreement.
Mm-hmm.
I really, at the last moment, there's usually like a mediation, and then the sides, authorize a strike vote and things like that. So I wanted to go observe the mediation and was advised not to. And I think that because there is this feeling that board members are not supposed to be involved in the negotiations at all, I was just going to observe. My responsibility as a board member, in my opinion, is to my superintendent, who organizes the negotiating team. He's not negotiating in those union conversations either. He's on the outside. He's set up his team, or she has set up her team, whoever is the superintendent. And then the workers have a union leadership. Well, I might be speaking with union leadership, but I'm accountable to the workers, and even in unions, people have disagreements within leadership, but when we do, we still want and are going to support our leadership. We have elected that leadership, and we are going to communicate as one voice. And I think that there was some misunderstanding between what the negotiating team and what the union leadership could do based on integrity. Because we submitted an offer that was worse than what the union struck down, and expected the union leadership to bring it to their workers. You can't do that. That is not able to be done. So there were some real issues, and I don't anticipate that there won't be any in the future. But I think that if we were to somehow involve the board, because St. Paul's Public Schools has made it so that their board is involved in negotiations, and made it so that there's a role for them to play, not a direct negotiating role, but maybe as a observer or sort of like a mediator type of voice. And since that's happened, there hasn't been a strike. There hasn't been these extremely conflictual items.
So I guess two questions. One, does the board ultimately have to approve the union contract?
Yes.
And then two, were you kind of happy with how it resolved itself?
Well, we had a 3-week strike, so no, I was not happy with how it resolved itself.
Right.
It could have.
But I mean, the final contract, do you think it was fair, or I don't know?
The union voted to support it, so yes, I think it was fair.
Okay.
I think that neither side got everything that they wanted.
Yeah.
So, and that's what happens in negotiation. I think it could have been solved earlier. I think I was very proud of, and my colleagues might not agree with me on this. I think direct action has a role, and the union had direct action on our board to make sure that they have their voices heard. And although it may not have been a strategy that's a long-term strategy, it was a strategy that got some things to this board and made sure that we heard the voices of the workers, because usually that's what's missing is the individual voice of the worker who is impacted by these changes.
Why do you think some of the sort of national politicians or state level politicians decided to get involved?
I don't know. I mean, I think it was an easy talking point for them. I mean, I think that I don't fault anybody for claiming to support workers and doing this. I mean, but these things are very difficult and they're complex. And just because you make one vote or you say one thing doesn't mean you're anti-union. I don't believe that many of my park board fellow commissioners are anti-union. They may be characterized that way. I believe that I am very pro-worker and pro-union. And I know that as a candidate, and in the strike and on the board, we'll try to take as strong of a stance as I possibly can to support workers, but also to remember that we're supporting the parks. As a MFE member, as a teacher, I also remind my fellow teachers that, we are here and our union is here for us, but the ultimate goal here is the kids. And the ultimate goal here is the parks. And I think that making sure that that comes into the context as well is important, because there are going to be things that come into conflict and decisions we have to make. And I think we just have to stand on our own integrity and our own values and make sure that we're checking blind spots and getting the best possible outcome. But that outcome cannot involve weaker unions, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, I mean, to me, the fact that it became so big is just another testament to how important parks are to people. And I continually am surprised at sort of the controversy that ends up coming around with parks. And so just a couple of things that have happened recently, maybe you could touch on. There was the mall over by the library. What exactly was the controversy, and how did it resolve itself? And, do you have any thoughts on it? Or
I have been forced to have lots of thoughts on this issue, because I kind of became, I was in the center of it a little bit, because it was a deciding vote. So what happened is in the long range plan for that area,
and exactly what is the area we're talking about?
The mall park, which is right between East of the Isles Parkway and the library.
Yeah.
Right. There's a whole long parkway there that is a through street. It has parking available.
And there's a bunch of old brownstones there. Probably, I don't know, maybe from the 40s. I don't know what.
Yeah, lots of housing. There's housing, and I think some of it's affordable. But so what happened is in the long range plan, they had compromised in the long range plan, which was about, I think it was adopted. So I'm not sure how many years ago. That we would cut off the roadway to East of the Isles and claim sort of the end of that mall space right near the lake and across the street. So to just cut it off to through traffic to cars, and then reclaim it, take away the parking spaces, and just make it all green space. So if you're looking, but if you think about the mall space, which is what I didn't really realize at the first, is it's a really long space. It's probably like a quarter mile, eighth of a mile from Hennepin Library to the East of the Isles. We were just claiming we were just cutting off the roadway to the East of the Isles and then claiming a little bit of space. So it was in the long range plan, which was sort of conflictual. It wasn't like, oh yeah, we'll definitely do that. Some people wanted to take the whole mall park. Mm-hmm. This was a compromise. So what happened is that Met Council is doing some work. So they were going to have to tear up that area anyway. And so people were like, oh, well, let's implement this long range plan around cutting off this roadway and just, save some money and government efficiency, all those things. Sounds great. Well, the neighbors didn't necessarily want that. And Commissioner Schaefer is very engaged with her community. She knows her community, not only the donor community, but also the other parts of her community that might not be donating to her campaign. And when the first vote came up, honestly, I was uninformed. I wasn't informed enough to make a decision that I felt right with. I had seen our former commissioner, Commissioner Meyer, that morning, and he really convinced me. He's like, "Yep, because he had experience with this long range plan. He's a very strong bike advocate." And I was like, "Okay, I think I was kind of on the fence on this. I think I'm going to vote that way. And once I took that vote, it didn't feel right. And I knew that as a commissioner, you have the right to, if you vote for something or against something, I can't remember which, you can ask for a motion to reconsider. So I was kind of holding on to that after the meeting and in time, and I looked at Commissioner Schaefer and I was like, can we meet out at the space? I kind of want to see the space and just make sure of what this is. Because we have been working on youth sports leagues and centralized registration. There's another resolution that was up. there wasn't the capacity to get out there. So I went out there with my wife, and we, we're looking at it and talking to Commissioner Schaefer and talking to some other residents. What it would have done is cut off to the east of the aisles, but it also would change the flow. There were some issues with the fire department and how the fire department would sort of navigate, and that was sort of the main crux of my new resolution, because we do need to understand how fire would get to different places in that area. But really, it was about how do we do no harm. In my opinion, and this is the opinion of one commissioner, and I'm an out of district commissioner. I'm going to default to my district commissioner who understands that area, which is Elizabeth Schaefer. She seemed to have a lot of community engagement. That was one piece I was going to default to, and then just my own understanding of this space. And a lot of bike advocates in the city are really upset with me, because they feel like I took a win away from them. And I would like to communicate to them that I don't think. I mean, maybe I took a win away, but I don't think it was an actual win. It is already a compromise. It's people giving us a little tiny space and we want to call it a victory. And I think it could have been a big loss, because if you change the drive flow in that area, we are still a city of drivers. And if we create ill will and we change things and it makes it so that people don't want to support good bike infrastructure, then we might be doing more damage than we are good.
No, that's an interesting point for sure. That that's more like a long range thinking in terms of what does this do for the overall attitude towards bike infrastructure. And I mean, I know from when I first met you how you rode your bike all over during the campaign. And
I left the park board meeting last night, rode my bike all the way to the Capitol to meet my daughter and wife at 8:30 at night. I mean, I love biking in this city. Love it.
Yeah.
But I also have to drive in it.
So another topic that I find interesting that has become, I think, a bit of a flashpoint is marijuana. And I don't know where that stands, but can I go smoke pot in the parks or not?
No.
And what's, is that still being debated, or has that been resolved and done?
So we've decided to have a policy instead of an ordinance. So there was some discussion around, and some people think we shouldn't even have a policy. But the policy is basically just, this is not supposed to be done. So we don't really enforce it too much. So it's something we shouldn't do. Maybe a lot more signage.
So the policy is don't do it. There isn't really an enforcement mechanism. So I'm not going to get a ticket or whatever. I did get a check at the dog park yesterday for my permit.
Oh, you did?
So, yeah. Which, they're out there. It's never happened to me this year, at least. But okay,
but there is still debate, because there is a lot of debate around. We don't want to criminalize this activity. We've seen what that happens when we criminalize THC.
Well, but I also think I can't just take a 6-pack in the park and go drink that, right? That, I would actually probably get a ticket for it.
You could get.
I was asking if I can drink a 6-pack in the park, but I got distracted because
You should not be able to drink a 6-pack in the park.
And that's where I'm like, well, so how is marijuana different from that? Should it just be a total free for all, or should there be?
Oh no!
Rules,
I don't think that I don't think we should be using marijuana in the parks outwardly. I think that smoking in the parks is already outlawed, so you're not able to
regular tobacco
usage.
Yeah.
We did institute some ceremonial tobacco use in the parks. So we just debated this issue, and the big thing that I heard was ordinance means we have to ticket or criminally enforce or things like that. Policy means this is our policy. We can try and enforce that and remind that of people. If there's disorderly conduct or somebody is argumentative or not responsive, then I guess if they're with the police, they
And
could be
if
arrested
they're,
for
if they're sleeping or eating an excessive amount of snacks, is that?
that should be just fine, as long as they clean up after themselves,
Right.
which would be really helpful at times as well.
So I don't know if this is still kind of an issue, but I know a few years ago the Hiawatha Golf Course was a big issue. Can you just give an update on like what has a master plan been put in place for that, or is that
There are definitely
still
things
under discussion?
we get some resolutions coming across our desk around Hiawatha Golf Course and planning and background and soil testing, things like that. You know, that's sort of preparing for that plan to be implemented. I voted against the Hiawatha Golf Course plan.
So what is it? I don't even know what the plan is.
It's a plan to transition the 18 holes of Hiawatha Golf Course into 9 holes.
Yeah.
And build more of like some better infrastructure for the old natural way of that land space.
Right. Which they kind of need for water management, right?
For water management, yes.
So how come you were against that? Is there a different plan you favored, or?
So the Hiawatha Golf Course, and you know, this was something that was debated 2 to 3 years ago, kept coming up. It's a historically black golf course. So the golf course became this place of pioneers in black golf. Solomon Hughes, other people. And we've recognized those things that's what's happened at that space. But the golf community, the black golf community specifically, did not want us to, like, there was an argument. And you know, years and years ago, I think it was Worth or one of the old superintendents, like they just dredged that space and made a golf course, right? Not thinking about an environmental concern, just like maybe it floods or whatever. So they took that space, made it into a golf course. The golf course consistently flooded. So who ended up going to golf at this probably insufficient golf course? Black golfers, right? Because of historical racism. So now, okay, well, we're going to own this space. This is our place. This is, you know, there's a bronze tournament. So then once we realized that the city was pumping water from the golf course in order to keep its flooding, they were also pumping that water, was having an additional effect on the homeowners around that golf course, preventing their basements from being flooded. So we decided that we were not going to pump anymore for the golf course, but we were still going to pump for the homeowners. And I found that really disturbing because the homeowners know that there's flooding that happens there. The park board is not invested in pumping this for a historically underrepresented community in a specific sport that is claiming this, like, this is our space. This is, you know, I didn't understand why 18 holes was not more important than 9 holes. I mean, I think that those things can be disputed, but I'm not in the black community. I'm not a person of color who feels more comfortable at that golf course versus others. And it's a public golf course. So it felt like it was an issue of, and the indigenous communities have claim to that space as well, like Hiawatha. So there was a lot of conflicting interests. I just think it's going to consist, anytime that there's funding that keeps coming up, this issue will come back to the forefront. And so it was sort of an unrealized plan. But it's working in the background, and we voted for the plan. The park board voted 6-3 for this plan, so it is moving forward. But I just think that every step of the way, there's going to be this confluence of interests in that space, and it's going to be really challenging to sort of. But it's a really important place. It's where the largest drain from the city empties.
So what, you know, what would be your perfect plan for it, use for it?
I do not have a perfect plan.
Okay.
I'm not going to claim to have any perfect plan, but I do know that some of the hypocrisy around, like, we'll pump for this and not pump for this, and you know that, I mean, plus it's a really important place for water distribution for the city. So the city has some responsibility there too. So I just don't.
It's difficult, right? Because like you said, it's got this historical black golf course. There isn't necessarily an alternative. I think, is it the only one in the city? The only golf course in the city limits?
Oh no, we have multiple public golf courses.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have Hiawatha, and the park board maintains a lot of those public golf courses. We have Hiawatha, Worth Park has a golf course.
of course.
Columbia in my
Okay.
neighborhood is a really nice golf course. So we have some Fort Snelling golf course out near Hiawatha, out at the Neiman Sports Complex. There's a golf course out there. I would argue we should close it. It's losing a lot of money, but maybe.
Which one is that?
It's Fort Snelling golf
Oh,
course.
right,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
So it's also part of a.
So does Minneapolis Parks administer Snelling? I was thinking that was federal. It's not. It's
No, Minneapolis Park Board runs that. Now the land is leased through the DNR,
Okay.
and I've argued that we need to look at that lease and renegotiate it a little bit, maybe explore, because it's changed and the lease isn't too favorable to the park board. But I think that there's a lot of opportunities for collaboration with the DNR out there, and the airport too. I mean, it's kind of its own space, like unincorporated.
Yeah.
And as a field advocate, I mean, there's a lot of great fields out there. There's those are our premier fields. So what's the long-term plan for those as we get into out of life expectancy? So if I'm elected to a second term, I'll definitely be exploring with planning how we either renegotiate or re-up that lease. I think it'll come up in 2029 or.
Certainly a lot of potential there. I mean, I've been there a lot with baseball, but I've always found the fort itself interesting. We've done like historical enactments with kids there. I think there's a big kind of, is it a YMCA facility or base camp?
Boy Scouts.
Boy
Scout. Yep.
And then also all the
center.
old
And there's a tennis center there.
Yeah, so it's an interesting.
And it's right along the light rail. I mean, it's actually really an interesting space. I've posed the idea because if we're thinking about, I think about youth sports a lot. I think about fields a lot. I think about revenue from those fields.
Yeah.
Because as a commissioner, I mean, everything can't. Like I tell my daughter, everything can't be free.
Mm-hmm.
We have to consider the realities of revenue producing things and also leveraging the public dollar to get the most public good. I mean, I think that those fields could be. I've traveled the country with my son at other baseball fields and where they have these big tournaments and there's lots of revenue. Neiman could be something like that at times. You could have people, stay downtown, take the light rail and go to the game, like for parents at least, maybe some. So there's ways for us to facilitate youth sports travel actually in this environment, which we are not capturing at all. And that's a piece that could bring people in. People want to travel to Minneapolis for a youth baseball or a youth basketball tournament. There are lots of people who would want to do it, and they bring a lot of revenue to the groups, and they bring a lot of exposure to the city.
Well, Minneapolis Parks definitely is a huge attraction, I think.
Most definitely. A bigger attraction than you would think. Even the community parks. I mean, you might have found this on your campaign, but I found it on mine that I go to a local park. There are people there from all over who either used to live there or, wanted to go to the space and just wanted to go to the local park. Like even our local parks are tourist attractions, not just our regional and other bigger entities.
So when you went for the park board and got elected, do you ever anticipate that it would be such a high profile job and all these kind of like decisions and stuff?
Terry, I don't know if it's that high profile. I mean,
people pay attention here.
People do pay attention, and I think that that's great. That's a testament to the city of Minneapolis and their and our ability to focus on local democracy. I think that the attention you're speaking of is the politicization of this role, and I don't think that this is a political role. I mean, I don't really consider myself a politician as much as I'm an elected official, because I don't want to politicize the parks, and I think that honestly, I'm seeking the DFL endorsement, and I'll be honored if the convention decides to endorse me. But I am not a huge supporter of the process and how we take our tent that is DFL and we sort of force each other to fight with each other about things. And I'm not going to participate in that. I think that we need to be a tent that's bigger, and maybe we need to distinguish ourselves in a little bit different ways at the local level. and it doesn't have to be super contentious all the time. It can be from this through line of like, hey, we're all in this together, but we just don't know how we're going to get there. And I understand that when you're talking about the mayor and city council, I mean those things can get really conflated.
Well, I mean, we have two, park board members running for city council, and their records on park board are, obviously
Absolutely, and
they're under a microscope, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, it's
those are, and I guess I can't really identify with that. I don't have a lot of political ambition in this game. So, and maybe that's.
So
maybe that's
you're not going to run for city council one day, or maybe you're not ready to say that.
I'm not. My plan is not to do that. My plan is to serve my community, and the way that I found that was the best way for me to do that was to be a park board commissioner. When you and I ran as Green Party candidates, it was an educational piece for me. It was like, I love democracy. I like the process. I want to know more about this thing that we call democracy, and the ways to get involved, and the ways to be, someone who can provide a voice for people who don't have a voice, or however that works. But I don't really want that. I don't have this ambition to do something else.
Right.
It's just literally, we need good people who are good candidates. We need good people who are going to serve on the board. And if people don't believe that about me, then that's not time anymore. But I think that we all have to serve our community, and we have to cultivate our democracy, and that's really what it's about for me. And in reality, and speaking of recent events, that's what I believe Melissa Hortman was trying to do, is just cultivate this, and a lot of us in the Democratic Party are trying to do, is cultivate democracy. And when we begin to fight with each other, we lose sight of what is really important. And I hope that I'd like us to stop doing that.
Yeah.
On the left.
It can be pretty ugly sometimes.
I'd like us to come, a little bit more together, because the other side, they're ready and they're united. And we don't have to fabricate enemies within ourselves. We can fight for what we know is a direction for America and democracy in our local communities that others don't necessarily believe in, or maybe they do. Maybe there is some pieces there where we can. Let's fight winning battles, not losing ones.
Well, that seems like a great message to wind up on, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to mention? We've covered a lot of ground for sure.
No, I really appreciate it. I'll be interested to hear. I think that it's hard for us local electeds to sometimes share and bring voice to what's in our head and what's in our hearts, because there's a lot of risk of cancel culture, this or the feedback or negative, and I guess I'm just gonna try and be more brave about that.
Well, I do like this format because you do get to speak more. People get a better sense of who you are. And then, when you get into the convention and you get 1 or 2 minutes to answer complex questions.
Exactly.
I don't feel like people can really get a sense of your standing. So once again, thank you so much. And
and if anybody, BillyMenz.com.
Yes,
Menz4 with the number 4 parkboard at gmail.com. So we're working we're working on the delegate lists right now for DFL convention. We've got some door knocking plans, and I think that some things that are coming up, the graduation of my son and the end of the school year. I mean, like, now it's kind of reorganize and make sure that people know.
What's the next event for you for door knocking or calling? Or
there will be. I don't have a firm date on it. It's probably July 8th or July 10th, but there's going to be a meet and greet fundraiser sometime in July. So otherwise, July 19th, which is the city convention, coincidentally, is Billy Menz's 50th birthday party.
Oh,
so
I should vote for you just for that reason.
If you want to spend Billy's 50th birthday party with him, go to the city convention.
All right.
So,
well, great. Thank you.
Thanks.